So Faraday's law says that if we have a changing magnetic flux through some loops of wire, we'll get an induced current or induced voltage. In Faraday's law, we have that capital N, which stands for the number of turns. So obviously, the more turns of wire or the more loops we have, the bigger the voltage we'll get. So here you see many turns of wire, very, very thin wire. Again, it's magnet wire, it's insulated, so the wire's not making conduction with each other. It may look that way because it's kind of gold. You may be thinking, oh, isn't that wire touching and conducting with each other? No, the wire's actually insulated. When you scrape away the gold, it's actually like a silver-colored wire there underneath that gold insulation. And it's not gold, it's like a varnish. Okay, so it's like a yellowish brown varnish there. But anyway, there's a lot of wraps here. This is the internal workings of one of those forever flashlights. Those are those flashlights that really don't have batteries in them. You pick them up and you shake them, and when you shake them, you can charge up a little rechargeable battery or actually a big capacitor, and then after you shake it for a couple minutes, you can turn on the switch and you'll have be able to make light and see what you're doing. They're great for things like boats and cars and places where where if you need a light, you want it to work, but you don't think about checking the batteries very often, okay, because you don't use the flashlight very often. So anyway, my big capacitor in mine broke and it wasn't holding a charge long enough. So I took it apart and pulled this part out. So there's the coil. Now the way this works is this is actually a magnet. That silver thing in there is a magnet. And so when I tip it, you can see that magnet slid down to the bottom. If I tip it back this way, it slides back the other way. Okay, so that magnet is able to slide back and forth in that plastic tube, which goes through the center of these coils. So obviously we're going to get a big change in magnetic flux, you know, for the North Pole and South Pole going through and then coming back through the other direction. There's going to be a pretty large change in flux and lots of wires, so we're going to get actually measurable voltage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hook this up to my meter. This meter that I have here is an older style needle gauge, or is a meter that has a needle on it instead of an LCD type digital display. And I'm going to hook up one lead to one end of that coil and the other lead to the other end of the coil. I'm going to twist it a little bit to hopefully help keep them from coming undone. And first I'm going to start on my meter here on the DC scale. See if I can hold these leads. I don't want them to touch, but I also want to make sure I have a good grip on them. Okay, so I'm going to put this on the DC scale to start with. I'm going to go to the lowest scale, and you'll notice if I slide the magnet, did you see the pulse on the needle there? So there's a positive pulse, there's a negative pulse. Positive pulse, negative pulse. Well, I might have lost my contact there. See if we can get it back here. Positive pulse, positive pulse, negative pulse. I don't know why the magnet's kind of sticking in there. Well, I do know why. It's because of my clips here. My clips are stopping it. I gotta try to hold this down here to keep the clips away from the magnet. Okay, so you'll notice one way it goes negative, the other way it goes positive. So on the DC scale, this is 0 volts. This needle would want to go below 0 and then above 0, below 0 and above 0. And basically this DC range would tell me I'm averaging 0 volts. And that's because one direction the magnet slides, we get a clockwise current, and the other way it gets a counterclockwise current. And since my leads are hooked up here and not changing, I'm getting a positive and a negative voltage going back and forth. So you really can't get a good sense as to how much electricity I might be generating. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and flip this to the AC scale. And now you'll notice on the AC scale, hopefully here, if I haven't lost my connection, if I shake this, I've lost my connection. Hang on a second. I'm not making good contact. We won't get a signal, obviously. Hopefully I've got it back. I can hold this. And you'll notice now, if I shake this back and forth, I'm on the 10 volt scale, so I'm all the way up to about 8 volts here right now. If I go faster, I can get it all the way up to above 10 volts. If I go slower, right, we have a slower changing magnetic flux, and you'll notice I get more like 5 volts. If I go even slower, more like 4, 3. And if I go fast, again, higher voltage. So the AC range is taking the voltage, and regardless of which way the current flows, it's indicating that as an output. And so when you shake the flashlight, there would be some diodes, like a little diode bridge, that would take that AC voltage coming out here, and it would turn it into a DC voltage so that every pulse of current, whether this way or that way, goes into the battery and charges it, or into the capacitor and charges it. Okay, so there's a good demonstration of Faraday's law.